Hi, everybody. I'm Christopher Davies with Eventful Conversations, and thank you for joining us for this very pivotal conversation. 2020 has been a very unique year, to say the least. Everything has changed. The event industry has been turned upside down, and nothing has changed more than how we need to do events going forward. We know that virtual will be a bigger part of what we need to do today and for years to come. And if I hear the word hybrid events one more time, I think I might just lose it. But what exactly are professionals in our industry doing to adjust and to stay relevant? We're lucky to have a group of individuals that have begun to create new ways to meet the needs of their customers and to sustain their businesses. Joining me today is Stuart Butler, the co-owner of the Northwest Event Show, Lynn Edwards, the founder of Proper Planning and Toolkit Event, Bryan Jane, the general manager with National Event Pros, and Chris Baldini, director of sales with AV Factory. Well, Lynn, let's just start with you. If you can tell us a little bit about how you become a part of the events industry, I'd love to kind of hear.
Oh, events, event planning. I think I started when I was 8, planning the family picnic. It's in my blood. Actually got into the hotel side of things just out of college. And so came up through large hotels, small independently owned hotels, convention centers, convention and visitors bureaus. And then I've owned the Proper Planning for about 22 years. So I've literally been on all sides of the business and been in it for a long time. So 30 plus years. And yeah, it's been quite an interesting year.
And Bryan, you?
Yeah, so I actually got into events as a part-time summer job, about 15 years ago. A neighbor of my parents was a face painter for Clowns Unlimited, which was National Event Pros at the time, was Clowns Unlimited. And so I worked a weekend, and that led on to working more and more and more. And over the years, it was kind of a job while I was going to college. And then at some point, the industry kind of hooked me, and I started to really love it. And 15 years later, I'm still here. Worked my way up, and now I'm help running the show at National Event Pros.
And Chris?
So I've been doing AV event stuff for about 15 years now. Before that, I was involved in computer consulting, so it's kind of a bit of a change of career, but actually very similar in a lot of ways. Lots of high tech stuff. I actually got into the industry because my little brother had been a theater geek pretty much his whole life, like since middle school. So he was working for AV Factory. He's been with AV Factory for 20, 25 years, something like that. And they needed a sales guy. I was kind of done with the computing stuff for a little bit and came on board and been here ever since. So.
And Stuart, what is your connection with events?
About 30 years now. Started parking cars for events and hospitality industry and turned that into a business back and started Butler Valet back in 94. And then, disruption 08 we started transportation, expanded to transportation, which then put us into figuring out how to market. So we did Weddings of Woodinville and got an opportunity to participate in the Northwest Event Show and said, hey, let's I love this industry. Let's do more in that space. So here we are.
The funny thing is, I always like to kind of find out how people kind of catch the bug. It's a very unique industry, to say the least, and it's a very unique breed who really just catches that fever and kind of stays with what we're doing. And it's interesting because we're going through some very challenging times right now, and I think obviously our industry is one that's probably one of the mostly has been impacted probably the most of some of the other industries out there. And with all the uncertainties, I think that there's a lot of us who are struggling to find new ways of doing things. And with that, I would love to kind of be able to give some takeaways for the audience to really kind of understand, like, what are we doing to pivot? So I'll start with you, Bryan. What are some of the things that you've actually done to pivot in your line of work?
Yeah, so we tried just about everything. Obviously, like you all know, the pandemic really started to affect the event industry prior to the stay-at-home order. Late February, a lot of corporate clients started working from home. Events started canceling. Venues started closing. So even before stay-at-home orders were in effect, we were thinking about what to do. it took us a little bit of time. Initially we were thinking, okay, what can we do that's in line with our business and what we're doing now? And of course, things got harder and harder to deal with restrictions, people not wanting to spend money, people not wanting to get together. So we really started throwing ideas at the wall, seeing what would work. We tried everything from selling cleaning supplies, cleaning services. We tried to hit the at-home stuff, which is a business we have kind of not focused on for several years. So, and none of that really worked. But we just kept trying things, care packages. We really utilized the talents we already had in place, the skills of our people, and we got a kind of a crash course on how to spin up a business in a week. And it seemed like every week we were trying something new. And nothing really stuck. And then finally, we discovered the drive-in movie. And so we got ourselves a couple of big 30-foot inflatable screens, and we moved to drive-in movies or drive-up movies at a few different venues, offered some catering services. That really took off. All the while in the background, like everybody, we were looking at doing virtual events and taking our service virtual. It took a long time. That was a long iterative process from March all the way through now, where we built our studio, and more than anything for a while, it was just us playing around, learning. And then after a while, it finally started to catch on. That built into the fall, winter time was, we were 2, 3, 4 events a week in our studio, and that's been really successful. But, more than anything, we really relied on, one of our we have two main kind of values at NEP to keep it simple and streamlined. One of them is cultural positivity, but the other one is building meaningful relationships. We really leaned on that second one, took advantage of all the relationships we've built over the past 30 years of National Event Pros, whether that's vendors and partners, clients, and really asked ourselves, what are the problems that people are having? How can we solve them? How can we get that message out there? And, as long as we stayed true to that, everything kind of came around and worked in the end. Just took a lot of hard work, failure over and over and over again to try to figure it out. But eventually it got there. And, we're happy to say we've had an awesome fourth quarter, and we're super excited for, 2021 and where this will take us.
And how about you, Chris? What kind of adaptations have you guys made at AV Factory?
Well, it's interesting to listen to Bryan because we've done a lot of the same things. The drive-in movie theater was definitely big this last summer. I think everyone dabbled in that a little bit. We did one with Canlis, the restaurant. Set up a big screen in their parking lot for a couple weeks. So that was fun. So there's been a lot of just different things. We've been helping out the King County courts. They've actually had to adapt how they're doing trials because their traditional courtrooms aren't big enough for social distancing. So they've taken over, they've taken over basically all of Maidenbauer Center as courtrooms now. So we've been supporting audiovisual services for that. So that's been keeping us fairly busy. But then we've been doing all the virtual event stuff, just like everybody else. So whether it's, coming out to someone's location and streaming an event from someone's venue. We've also been doing a lot of what you're seeing today, what we're calling remote engineering services, especially right now where we're back into a lockdown in Washington State. You can't really get people together at all. So we do a lot of this where we bring a bunch of different speakers in virtually, mix everything together in our studio, and then broadcast it back out again. So that's been keeping us fairly busy. And then we also have a studio, just like most AV companies in town seem to have built out a studio. Our relationship with Maidenbauer Center, we've been the in-house AV provider there for 20 years now. So their theater went pretty much quiet when the pandemic hit. So we built a studio in their theater at the Maidenbauer Center, which has been awesome. It's a great space. It's a legit theater with rigging. It's 40-foot wide stage. There's seating in the room. So as we start to come out of the pandemic, you can actually have a studio audience while you're shooting your virtual event. So that's been really cool. And we've been doing a variety of corporate events and also a lot of nonprofit auctions, things like that. So that's what we've seen has really kept us busy. A lot of the corporate stuff has died off for the time being. They don't seem to have to do their live events as much as the nonprofits that really need to stay in business. So we've done some corporate stuff like shareholders meetings, things like that, but a lot of the corporate stuff has gone away. It's been the nonprofits.
Yeah, I can see that entirely.
So yeah, that's kind of what we're up to. Pretty similar to a lot of AV companies, as far as I can tell.
And what about you, Lynn?
We have, I think end of 2019, we'd produced 100 live events that year all over the country. And you get, familiar with your partners and your venues and how to execute. And it seemed like when we started in March, we were on a fast runway to turn our first digital event. And it was just drinking from a fire hose as far as the venue, where, where are you going to host your digital event? And I believe there's 160 virtual platforms in the marketplace right now. I've demoed almost 50, and we produced 50 events on 15 different platforms. So what's interesting is you acquire a skill, you refine it, you kind of, I don't know if I'd say master it, but you definitely feel like it's second nature, and then the way that you do business, every part of that changes, and it's through a new lens. It's through a new requirement of learning a new language of this is going to be on a digital platform versus in a ballroom. I said early on, I'm not sure if you could throw me a curveball on a live event that I couldn't, fix. AV doesn't work, and I'd be like free beer in the lobby. I would find a way to get them, and I would figure that out. But I think it was July. We had an event that did not fire off. We had tech issues, and it did not launch. I had 87 speakers text me in like 13 seconds. We had a AWS update an hour before the show that impacted the entire platform. So I've never in my 30 years been in a hotel that burned down the day of our event. And yet here I was on a platform that was not firing anything. And I just called it, time of death. Here we go, 1 hour in. And it rocked my world. It's just, I had no ability to get to the support, to get to the tech solutions we needed to make it work. And we had to, re-record 35 hours of content, repackage it, and get it to the ticket holders. So huge challenges, but also it's been fun to learn a new language, so to speak. And, my team's a lot of amazing digital natives, I call them, the millennials that grew up in this, and they just embraced it like it was a fish to water, and they really ran with it. So it's been a challenge, but I think sometimes there's some latency in just being able to not be challenged this way. Stuart, I was glad to hear you say 30 years because I felt like the old lady of the event boys club here. But 30 years, I have definitely been through some ups and downs. It's very cyclical, like life and everything else. And so you've weathered some storms, but this one was a direct hit. I think of the Battleship game, and it was like, we're in the business of gathering. And the first order that came out was do not gather. Could not have been more direct hit. And, I think we were hit first, hit the hardest. We'll probably be the last to get back full speed. But I really believe that our nature is to be innovative. And sometimes when you're cruising along and you're so busy, I don't know about you guys, but you're so busy, you just do. You're not forced to think. And in a way, I feel like this pandemic and everything else that's going on has been an accelerator to get us back to innovating and thinking and creating versus just firing off the to-do list. So we've been thinking, doing a lot, but also having to think while we do it. And it's been great, but it's also been exhausting, just the mental grind of trying to do things in a brand new way. Imagine if you're right-handed, it's like, no, I got to do everything with your left hand now. And it's just, you got to focus. The mental focus was extreme to try to get 50 off the ground this year. So we're tired, but happy we made it through.
I can imagine. It's interesting because, you look at the dynamics that have changed, because of some of the disruptors recently. But as I'm listening to you, it's kind of funny because at the end of the day, you kind of hinted at this as well. That's kind of the whole nature of being an event planner anyways. Like even before this, how much, pivoting and last minute changes, is part of the event industry as a whole. I know you have a lot to add to that too, Stuart. What are your thoughts?
Well, after the initial, just kind of hit you in your face, shovel in the face. I think I'm still there actually. But the Northwest Event Show, that's a gathering of our industry. So, we kind of we were looking ahead where we were moving in the first place, and we were moving more towards trying to have that engagement with our audience more on a consistent basis. So that's what we pulled forward is more having that engagement, and really is trying to find a way to how do we support our industry, how do we I think we've turned more into advocacy, a position of advocacy, even working with the Live Events Coalition. Just the conversations that I'm having, Lynn, we've talked, since the beginning of this, and, trying to learn a new language of where we're moving has been, for me, it's just this continual upskilling, learning, networking. It's come through conversation. It's just not stop having conversation to understand what's happening, where's the opportunities, where can we grow, how can we bring these resources to the industry so that we can move forward, ideate. Those are the things that we're working with and trying to figure out how to bring those resources more forward so that we can grow as an industry. I would really like to know what steered you towards, the direction that you guys went with, where your pivot's been. What are those, drivers that have steered you in where you've landed?
I think that it does go back to basics, and being an event professional, oftentimes, there's this perception of we're going to hire a company to print the name badges. And yes, ultimately we're engaged in a lot of administrative project management tasks. But as a professional, we always have fought, since I started 30 years ago, for legitimacy to be at the table around the strategic conversation. And that starts with, why are you having this event? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want people to see, do, feel differently when we're done? Those strategic questions. Ultimately, we will pick the linens of the color of the linens, but let's start with this conversation. So it's forced us to go back to that conversation of, before you race to pick a platform. And what's strange is, when we were using venues, I would have this happen. I would have a client call me and say, we've decided to go to the downtown Marriott. And then I'd go, okay, tell me about your event. And they'd tell me what they're trying to do. And it did not align with that venue in any way. And I would think, that's odd, you raced to pick to this downtown property when you just told me everything that's better suited for a resort. And I have found the same thing happen with the platforms. People are so consumed with the how are we going to deliver this, that they race to pick a platform, and you don't have very educated consumers. I mean, I'm a consumer big time, and I'm still not super educated. And so they're buying products they're not super familiar with, and ultimately, a lot of these products don't even have a content delivery network. I look at AV Factory as a partner, and I want to reiterate that relationships have been so key during this transition. But with a live event, you'd say to a client, they're busy with this big menu, and you'd say, don't skimp on audiovisual. People came to see and hear. Yes, they want to enjoy chicken, but they came to see and hear. Let's make sure that is locked and amazing. And I feel the same way with the digital events. People are kind of skipping the seeing and hearing experience and the production value and the experience of the people doing the seeing and hearing, lights, camera, action. And it's like a second thought. It's like they're doing that last. They're picking the venue with the pretty wrapper, and they don't really have a solid plan of how to produce a show through the screen. So I guess just all of that for Bryan and Chris and you guys to say that, from the event professional, I'm trying to coach up the why are we having this and the how is it going to get shown to the world. And then, yes, ultimately we'll decide if there's a chat button, but let's get that priorities kind of figured out. I think that's one thing I would say. It's just been my experience about that.
Our focus has been from the content, purely content. That's the absolute most important. Like Lynn was saying, if it's wrapped up all pretty, doesn't matter if the content is something that nobody wants to see, right? So,
yes.
We worried about that first. Is the host engaging? Is the activity meaningful for the people participating? Is it something that the company we're working with, is it something that goes along with their values, and focus on that first. Because if you don't have them hooked, it doesn't matter how good the layout is, how good the video quality is, even the participation. They need to be engaged in the content 100%. And I also want to take it way back to something Lynn said earlier, just real quick, about needing to innovate. And this was something I actually was thinking about last night. For National Event Pros, in a normal year, we put on over 2,400 events. That's everything from a simple birthday like bouncer at a house to a corporate picnic to a full conference. And so, that many events, that much stuff going on in a calendar year, it's hard to sit back and think, okay, what's next? What are we going to do next year? So this situation has really forced us to sit back and be like, we have to think different, move differently. What is this company going to look like? And that's definitely been a huge driver. What we've had to do is just think about 12 months from now, 18 months from now, what are we going to have to be doing to stay healthy? So
Lynn and I have actually talked a few times about producing these types of events and just the mentality, kind of how you have to think about a virtual event differently than your traditional live event. And I've been saying this since we first started doing this. It was really obvious right from the beginning. I mean, you're not so much making a live event anymore. You're producing a broadcast, and it's a kind of a mind shift as far as what you actually have to do to make that engaging. And I was actually just watching. I thought most people had figured it out by now because we've been doing this for 9 months. But I was watching an event a couple weeks ago, just because I watch a lot of other people's events because I'm curious what other people are doing because there's a lot of really good ideas out there. But I was watching this one, and it was very much a live event that was just being streamed. Like they were doing things like they would change presenters, and you'd have a name slide come up on the screen, full screen for 15 seconds while they shuffled stuff around. And you can kind of get away with that during a live event because everyone's eating their chicken and drinking their wine. But during a broadcast, that's just dead air. So You're still seeing that out there. And I think you really need to think about how are we, like everyone's saying, how are we going to make this engaging and make it more of a broadcast and not just a streamed live event. And I think it's something that as we come out of this pandemic, hopefully over the next 3, 6, 9 months, however long it takes for a vaccine to be effective. I think you're going to see, Christopher, you said you didn't want to hear about a hybrid event ever again, but I think you're going to see a lot of hybrid events coming out of this because people are going to start like, let's bring a small live audience back in, but then we're going to stream it still like we have in the past. And I think it's going to be just as important, if not more important, to think about, okay, now we're doing a live event and we're doing a broadcast. How do we make both engaging? And there are ways to do it. I mean, watch any award show you've watched on TV does that. Those are all a live event and a national broadcast, and they make the national broadcast engaging and they make a live event engaging, but they're almost two separate events happening at the same time.
When you talk about planning two separate events, our focus, our team's focus, we've got, lots of events on the books for this year, is integration of the two events, not just plan them separate in two different lanes. It's where are those connection points, those natural connection points, and just feeling fully integrated so that your virtual attendees don't feel like they're not in the room. The in-room people don't feel like they're missing some content that was for virtual. So it's just, I think we need to be really mindful of integration of the experiences.
I think I'm looking at it from the technical side of things because I'm a technical guy. Like there's different technical pieces that need to happen to make the live portion and the virtual portion integrated, like you're saying. So something that we do all the time. We've been doing that for years, but I think it's different for a lot of people that are going to be trying to figure out both sides of it.
Well, and it's funny because you look at hybrid, and the hybrid is the future, not just with cars, but with events too. And when I sit there and say, we hear this word hybrid, but what it is like, what does that really mean to a majority of the people out there? I think that's where the disengagement, the discord comes from. Like, it really wasn't until my first meeting a while back, I had a conversation with Lynn, just asking, how did you pivot? She's like, Chris, one thing we had to do is we had to actually create our experiences to be more like actual TV production. That's the feel we need to do to create it to be engaging. And then, one thing I'm super jazzed about is actually getting into the Maiden Bower to do this in person, to sit across from one another, social distance, of course, but still be in the same room and create an experience where it's kind of welcoming in.